If you're looking for exclusive content, please don't look any further than joining the Trap Talk Patreon family. Some of the best reptile keepers in this industry are part of the Trap Talk Patreon family. As soon as you join the Patreon family, you connect to a Discord. You can also tap into an Instagram group chat, connect with some of the most diverse keepers we have in the reptile hobby today. Shout out to my Patreon members and be ready for Trap Fest 2026. It's going to be one of the biggest events yet. Find all information again in the very first link in the description below. And again, thank you so much to all my fellow Patreon members out there. Cheers! Shout out to USARC and all the USARC members. If you don't know what USARC is, do not be ashamed. Simply click on the third link in the description below. Go to usarc.org. See what it's all about. See how you could actually protect your own collection whenever legislation might hit your backyard. You just never know. Things are changing constantly in the reptile hobby, and it's good to know when things are creeping up in your area. So shout out to Phil Goss, shout out to Vanessa, shout out to Jeremy, shout out to all the USARC supporters and teammates out there. Cannot wait to see how much we fight this year to keep our animal rights. And if you're not a USARC member, talk to your fellow keepers and just let them know what USARC's all about, and they're here to protect our animal rights. Shout out to USARC and all the USARC supporters.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Trap Talk Reptile Network, coolest reptile network in the world. This is episode 723. I cannot believe it took 723 episodes to get this guy. Wow, Dr. Tillis in the building tonight. I'm so excited, guys. Whew, Nidovirus. How many times have we talked about Nidovirus on this damn channel, you know? All the time. And I've had so much early experience with Nido and, you know, never really understood it. Not that we're going to understand it after tonight, I feel like, but, you know, it's cool to get a better understanding of what we're dealing with out there. But yeah, I'm your boy MJ. What's good, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Trap Talk with MJ. Dude, couldn't be more stoked with tonight's guest. I've been hearing about Dr. Tillis for a long time now. Got to meet him once in Daytona. Really, really awesome guy. Young looking guy for sure. But man, you know, can't knock the guy's work behind not just Nidovirus a lot, just the love of the reptiles, right? This guy's a legit reptile lover with a degree, a PhD. So it's pretty awesome. This is cool. I could literally count maybe on both hands how many actual PhD guests I've had on the episodes. Maybe I need more, but I do have a new one coming. But yeah, man, I'm excited. Listen, if this is your first time watching, welcome. All right. Shout out to all my returning viewers and shout out to my trappers. Just want to remind you, Trap Talk is 7 days a week on this channel. That's right. Every day there's a brand new channel. You can just feast some reptile content for your liking any day of the week. And you can listen to all these episodes on all major audio platforms. There's Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, all the major ones, man. So go after it. Thank you for all the feedback. I appreciate feedback in the comments. Definitely drop a either guest you want me to bring on or a certain topic you think is important that I need to cover. Maybe I'm sleeping on it. Let me know in the comments, or simply just come join the Trap Talk Patreon family. Click the very first link in the description below. Get to know me better and all the trappers. Shout out to my trappers, man. But shout out to tonight's sponsor, man, the workshop, RepTillium, Josh Hansen. Heard about Josh for about 5 years now. But, you know, listen, getting to see what this guy's doing right now, it's next level, keeping reptiles to the whole new level. I mean, this is just next level stuff, guys, that I'm about to be showing you guys here this year. But for now, do me a favor, go follow Josh Hansen on Instagram. Also go to his YouTube channel and go to his website. Find all the links in the description below, and just be ready for a lot more collaborations and more behind the scenes of what's happening over at the workshop Reptilium. Thank you so much, Josh Hansen. Man, this guy's no joke. So excited. Thank you so much, Josh, for your support. Also, tonight's episode is brought to you by Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros, one of the best doing it in the chondro game. Red neonates, yellow neonates. This guy is probably the biggest yellow neonate advocator in the game for sure, but he has the work to prove it. I'm telling you, all his yellows are pretty fire. That's for sure. Thank you so much, Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros. Type in TX Chondros on IG and you'll see how many other Texas chondro keepers he puts on the map. And they're all balling. I'm telling you right now, amazing quality coming out of Texas. And you can find that all on Texas Chondros Instagram. So thank you so much, Mark Hager. Again, TexasChondros.com. Be on top of all his projects, what he has going on this year. I'm excited. Shout out to Mark Hager. And then also shout out to Focus Cube Habitats, #1 PVC design enclosures in the game. Everything you see behind me, even though it's dark, are 3x2x2 PVC design Focus Cube Habitat enclosures. And man, my room is literally 96% Focus Cubed out. I'm so excited. This is a goal of mine. And listen, if you want to be uniformed and look awesome at the same time, dude, this is your place. Focus Cube Habitats, they don't play, top notch. This is where you get quality at right here. Okay, guys. So thank you so much, Stephen and Ashley. Focus Cube Habitats, Flex in Texas, all day, every day. Find the links in the description below. And yeah, guys, I'm excited. Enough is enough. I'm ready to get this episode on the way, because this is definitely going to be a multi-part series. I feel like this is a guess where we're not going to get all in 2 hours, unfortunately, but we're going to get a lot for sure. All right. And you guys are in for a treat. So shout out to everyone in the chats. If you definitely have an important topic to relate what we're talking about and experience, and if I'm not looking at it, dude, drop a super chat and I'll find it for sure. But I'll do my best to answer any questions. If you have any questions, please, man, please. We entertain anyone to be active in the chats. It's going to be a good time tonight, and I'm ready to learn. All right. So without further ado, do what you got to do to get your mind right, and do what you got to do to stay hydrated. This is episode 723. Dr. Steven Tillis coming at you right now. Let's go.
Good.
You ready for do more in the future? Trap Talk podcasts?
Yes.
Man.
Only Trap Talk. Exclusive.
Yes,
Exclusive. Oh.
So stop calling us.
Rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the crop, God love it or not. I'm hot from the hop to the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with everybody, we do it. Everybody, we do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up.
And we are live, episode 723. Welcoming for the first time, Dr. Tillis in the building. What's up?
Thank you for having me. I'm a little tired, but I'll try and keep up best I can.
All right. Well, hopefully my energy could kind of like bleed into you a little bit, and then you'll be all right. It's kind of like, I'm a firecracker over here because I'm excited to have you on, buddy. I'm not gonna lie. I'm really stoked that you took the time for this tonight. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to being on. This is one of the podcasts I listen to when I need energy to get through the cleaning snakes. I have a lot of animals and I've been doing it a long time, and it does start to get to be a job at a certain point. And so, having the right kind of something to keep the mind going is always a big help.
Listen, there's so much to talk about, like we talked about in sound check, and again, we're gonna get as much as we can. But I just got to know, man. There's not too many individuals out you and like you who spent. I get it. It could be a job for most, like it is for me. But education, like investing that much time into the education portion of what you have, is a whole nother level of obsession and passion, I feel like. And I'm curious, like what made you or motivated you or even told yourself, I need to pursue this to a doctorate degree when it comes to like reptiles and or just your whole background in general,
Oh man, it's my route to get to where I am is certainly non-traditional. I definitely didn't start out with the intention of pursuing a PhD, especially in mm, you know, tiny microbes. Like that is the least interesting part of keeping snakes for me. And it only became relevant to me until I lost a colony of snakes to Nidovirus.
That's what it
And
was.
from that point, that kind of got my foot in the door. I was in the right place at the right time at the University of Florida. And Dr. Robert Ossoboff, who was on the first paper to ever discover ball python Nidovirus, he was starting a lab at the university. I had finished undergrad and was sort of not really sure how to deal with a bunch of sick snakes, and it was sort of the right place, the right time, and I was able to work with, not just nidoviruses, but like my nidoviruses or my serpentoviruses was what they ultimately ended up being classified as.
And it's crazy because so many people's experience with what we're talking about is all circumstantial. It's all different. Like it all weighs in different, moments of how things died and how things even occurred when this shit happened. And from what I understand with you, you were saying how like nobody was talking about nidovirus during this time. Like it really wasn't a thing when your animals were going down, correct? Like you had no one really else to kind of like inform this to and get information from or anything like that.
Yeah, I think Cody and Pio were the only other ones really at that point that were talking about it publicly. And honestly, that was sort of forced into my hand anyway, because I had an animal that, you know, dealt with sick. And this is at the very beginning. We just had a word to use to describe sometimes snakes get sick, sometimes it's more than bacterial, sometimes it's virus. And now we have a word for that virus, and that word is nidovirus, which eventually became serpentovirus because nidovirus is a very broad characteristic. All right, give me a second. Lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So really didn't know what was sort of going on with these animals, and so I was dealing with sickness in my colony, tested my whole colony as part of a study, and out of 100 or so mixed species of python, I had 9 different strains of virus in there. Some of
Right.
which were in sick blood pythons, some of which were in healthy carpet pythons, some of which were in green tree pythons that have lived their entire lives with no issues. And we really didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if that was like one virus made it into a colony and then exploded in diversity. But long and short of it is, I tested everything. I tested everything. I tested everything. Everything was healthy. I had no reason to think that there's any sort of virus left in this population at this point. Because I was in the middle of grad school, I decided to downsize my colony. I shipped out a blood python that had, again, tested negative 3 times, been subclinical its entire life, made it into another colony, popped with respiratory infection, tested positive, and that was sort of brought out publicly at a time when that was not really a survivable thing to take reputationally.
Yeah.
But it, again, sort of, I was sunsetting my own sort of public representation in the industry anyway to focus in on grad school. And so, things worked out the way they do, but like, yeah, it sort of brought me into a conversation that no one had the information to have at that point, and left me with the motivation to try and figure out what the hell happened to me, to my colony, to my animals. And ultimately don't know that I'm any closer to making any firm statements, but I can certainly show you where the black boxes are and where people fall into those black boxes when they talk about these viruses and pathogens in general.
Yeah, right. 100%. And you know what's crazy is like at the end of the day, man, no matter how much we discuss this, right? I feel like there's always something or a new case that pops up that either debunks everything we think that fixes it, or I don't know, like, the whole.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And one of the craziest things is like not too many people don't understand. And I try to, being so committed to the chondro community at this point, I try to explain to people how to truly nidovirus test for something. And again, I don't even know if you could even test enough times to really be sure when shit just pops up. You know what I mean? Or when
the problem is multifaceted, and we can, a lot of it is technical, but a lot of it is sort of simple too. And so I have with me, this is a poster I did of a new genus of serpentivirus we found in arboreal pit vipers.
Okay.
And what I love about this study is that it's a great representation of what I think is also going on in green tree pythons. But before we even get into that, like you can kind of just look at this is a phylogenetic tree of serpentivirus, and people think that serpentivirus is one virus, but it's 7 different genre, so 7 different genus of
Mm.
virus. And this top genus, the Pagodavirus, is what we really care about as python keepers. And I don't know if it shows up, but almost half of those are green tree python viruses.
Are you able to know which ones are the deadly ones and which ones are like, okay, they're not going to die off this one? Like, you know, because I feel like there's some cases which we all know of snakes having Nido and they fucking are 20, 30 years old and they just got it, you know, but they're okay. So is that what that means? Is what you're explaining right now? There's just levels in different like departments of Nido.
That's probably part of it, but even an answer that I can make to that is limited on the portion of genome that I'm making those comparisons against.
Hmm.
And so these genomes are 30,000 bases long. And when I'm making genetic comparisons, sometimes it's only 100 bases. And so I am making comparisons off of like what 0.3% of the genome or something like such a small amount.
Right.
And so yeah, I can pick out differences between viruses that come out of symptomatic snakes and viruses that don't, but I can find more similarity. Like I can almost in the same strain find asymptomatic and symptomatic versions, which means either the individual animal is a large part of the equation, the viral load is a part of the equation, or there's some other diversity that's occurring at some other point in the genome that we're not even looking at that is explaining these differences in clinical severity. The other issue too is probably some synergistic component with bacteria, especially mycoplasma. Um, we just don't know. There's basically umpteen different variables of strain slash species. You know, what I stress showing that phylogenetic tree is people think Nido is one thing, and it's not just one thing. It's not even like 10 things. It's like 7 genuses of virus that are affecting a huge diversity of reptiles. And so, you know, people really do a disservice of talking about it like it's one thing and like there's going to be one test to detect that one thing. And so the problem is there's so much genetic variability that a lot of the tests that are commercially available miss even mildly divergent strains. And so they're really good tests if they can detect the strains in your colony. But if they can't, then you can easily lend yourself a false sense of security of having negative test results that are negative because that test can't detect all of the diversity we see in Nidovirus.
Okay, so in a sense, are you saying that there are possible, you know, test companies that are completely missing other levels of Nido and they're only testing only one strain or maybe or one just one level of it or what you know
100%. But the problem is we don't know which strains they can pick up or not. Like they can pick up a lot of them, they can pick up some of them, but like the way our diagnostic lab does testing is fundamentally different. And because it is fundamentally different, it's more expensive and it's slower, but we're
Right.
able to find those really diverse viruses. And so our test will pick up the full diversity we see in nidoviruses at the expense of being 4 times the cost and taking us 3 times the time. But like, and that also isn't really a thing that can feasibly scale to a large colony. And so like basically we live in a complicated world. Tests are tools, and all of these tests, like we say, I got it tested, and just make that as a flat statement. But that's like saying I put them through quarantine. Like, does that mean it was like a 3-day quarantine or a 3-month quarantine or a 3 year quarantine and you had separate like there's different levels to all of this, and we can get super technical as to what the differences in these testing are. But
Right.
one of the challenges that people run into is that like there's a lot of viral diversity, and the tests that are being made available are not tests that are fundamentally able to pick up wide genetic diversity. But they're still better than nothing. And if you're maintaining good biosecurity and doing the motions of good testing and can still pick up a certain amount of strains, like it's better than nothing. But you can easily lie to yourself as well by saying, especially with green tree pythons, because we see so much stinking diversity in green tree pythons, it's very easy to miss divergent strains. And so that circles back to this study with vipers, because we also see the same pattern in vipers. We see a ton of different host species, which you can almost picture as like different localities of green tree pythons. And we see a ton of different viral diversity, a ton of different strains, and we can pick out and theorize really complicated patterns in this and maybe start to there's plenty of explanations for it. So this
Yeah.
whole study was like 150 confiscated venomous snakes that came out of New York, and it was part of like an Animal Planet TV show. It's super cool to be a part of that study.
You know the name of that show was by chance?
I think it was the zoo. It's the one themed around the Bronx Zoo.
All
But
right.
essentially we had so a whole new genus of serpentivirus. We had about 4 different species of virus that came out of these vipers, but within that there were multiple strains. And we can see that like this strain we found in almost eight different host species, everything from rough-scaled deathadder to a gaboon viper to arboreal pit vipers. Then we have other stuff where it's like the only virus that we found in white-lipped pit vipers was another clade. And then you can even hypothesize that like we see all of this diversity in clade C, and all of these strains are coming out of beautiful pit vipers. Almost all of those are positive, so maybe a strain made it into a beautiful pit viper, mutated like crazy, bounced back out, bounced back into a half a dozen other species, including super divergent ones. And so like we just don't know. There's 4 different viruses on here with 8 different genotypes, and those are telling potentially 8 different stories, is basically what it comes down to. And this is 4 species in one genus out of dozens and dozens of species in 8 different genre of these viruses now. And so it's like with COVID, you had all of the world's scientists working on one thing. This is like working on 200 different COVIDs. And so any rule we make on anything is probably going to have an exception somewhere in the diversity.
So let's do this. Let's take it back real quick, because I feel like the only reason why I'm so on top of my shit, and maybe I'm not, I don't know. Like I said, there's levels to even biosecurity, like you mentioned, and it all depends when you really know you're doing something good versus just causing an issue still. So for you, if we could take it back, right? Since really Nidovirus wasn't a discussion, what was your biosecurity like? Were you already kind of strict before all this shit happened? Like, was that already a habit of yours?
I would describe it as industry standard, which is to say that like, I get it in, maybe get it in, keep it on paper for the first month, make sure there's no mites.
Right.
Maybe let it, sit for up to 3 months and then move it into the colony.
That's the way I was taught in 2017. That's what I was taught. About a month.
Yeah.
Especially if it eats, it shits, and it sheds. If those 3 things happen and it looks normal, then you're more than likely okay. That's what I was always taught.
Yeah. And honestly, in terms of like grander zooming out strategies, I basically take that same strategy and just extend it out longer, though. Like,
Yeah.
The diversity of hosts of pathogens out there is just immense. We just don't know the unknowns. And so because you can't test for everything and we don't know everything that's out there, at this point, my cheapest defense against anything is stick it in a really long quarantine, keep a keep a lookout for clinical signs, and if it isn't showing you problems, it probably represents less of a risk than.
Say that last part you broke up.
It probably represents less of a risk than if you just throw it in your colony.
Right, of course, but then again, like, you don't know until you throw the wrong thing in your colony, and then, oh shit, what the hell just happened? And then now you're like,
yes, yeah.
And of course, that's kind of what happened to you. But with me, I had one snake that tested positive for Nido in 2019? I can't remember, but man, I was so obsessed with, obviously I had to test everything, but I want to know the root, like who gave it to this snake? Like, how did it come about? Like, it was driving me insane. Right. And luckily that was like, what's crazy is even the male, this is what's also nuts. This male was with this snake for about a month. And this snake pet tested negative for Nido when it was paired with the snake that had Nido and died. So but I basically still quarantined. That snake never went back into my building ever again, just because I didn't believe the test. I was like, I don't believe that shit. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Honestly, yes. Like, testing is a tool, but like, if it talks, and acts like Nido, even if it's testing negative, like, it's more likely there's a divergent strain in that animal than like it's negative. Like the baseline prevalence in pythons, so far as we can tell, both in wild and captive pythons, is like double digits. So, anywhere from 10 to 20 to 50%, depending on species.
Did you ever find the root of the issue with all the, levels of sicknesses you were getting with your animal? Like, did you even think of, which I'm not sure if you did or not, but did you were wondering, okay, what was the initial root animal that brought all this shit in? Or what did you do?
It doesn't work like that. There were 9 different strains, and those were probably 9 different introductions. And, the green tree python was always in that green tree python and never causing problems. The blood pythons, I had multiple very divergent strains. And so I think what happened was I had a rushed quarantine that introduced, you have host adapted strains in most colonies. Like, if you're not doing any testing at all, your chances of having a host adapted strain in your colony is pretty high. And so any given colony is probably going to have something in it that probably isn't going to cause problems. But if you mush new diversity together into slightly immunocompromised animals, then you can end up with problems. And so I had moved animals out of quarantine at the same time I had moved the whole colony into a new building. And so it was like, maybe the introduction of those strains under normal circumstances would have meant like a little bit of rest, and then they would have been fine. But because it was a new building and new strains, and some of those animals were slightly immunocompromised anyway because they were going through the end of a quarantine, you kind of have this perfect, recipe. Like, in general, it's not helpful to think of these viruses as like evil or even trying to kill the host. Like, if you go down to the Florida Everglades and pluck a Burmese python out of the swamp, there is a 1 in 4 chance that snake is that snake is shedding enough virus in that moment to test positive on one of our Nido tests. And so, like, they have it. It's just part of their microbiome. And so the exceptions that cause problems oftentimes are the circumstances we create in captivity, be it, maybe you have a host adapted strain that's not causing problems, but you put it in a very high density environment inside of an immunocompromised animal, and it becomes a virus mutation factory, and it's sitting on a pile of kindling.
Right.
And so that was kind of the probably what happened is I introduced some new strains that may or may not have been harmful in those specific animals, but were harmful in lightly immunocompromised animals being exposed for the first time as an adult, kind of thing.
And from what I understand, that collection got closed off, right? Like, you kind of boxed it and did it. Now it's kind of almost on its own.
I exterminated anything that was in the colony as an adult at that point. Like, anything that was positive, anything that had ever been exposed to anything that was positive. Because again, at that point, I had an animal that I'd sent out to someone who had tested negative 3 times over the span of 6 months. And so I can't trust anything at that point. I'm like, if it was in a building with something positive, And so what was left at that point was neonate animals that were never in that building,
Mm,
and that formed the basis of what is now a subset of my snake colony.
wow. Now, with the information you have now, would you still do the same thing? Would you would have put
Oh,
down a lot?
absolutely not. No,
Yeah.
like I euthanized probably about half of the Morelia that I euthanized. I think had a host adapted strain that probably could have lived their entire lives without ever breaking with respiratory. And so, it's
Yeah.
complicated to manage a colony like that. But if you're not doing testing, you're probably managing a colony like that
And that's the
without
thing.
realizing it.
And that's the thing. I feel like people don't really give a shit until it's happening to them, right? And that's kind of what happened to me. Like I don't know if you heard me say this. Do you ever remember Forrest Fanning? He was good friends
Oh yeah.
with. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I
So
actually have a great Forest Fanning story
I would
if
love.
you want a digression.
I would love to hear it. Yeah. So my Forrest Fanning thing was the first time he ever came to my room after I was just a huge fan of the guy. First thing he says when he walks in, he's like, "Oh yeah, there's Nido in this room for sure." And
Yep.
I was like, "What?" And I had no idea, but him and I dealt through the same importer, so he knew what I had. And that was the only time Nido was ever brought up to me. We never deep dive. We were talking about other shit right after that. And then as we're moving along, I had that animal go through that where it died, and then I was a friend of mine, Socrates, who tests a lot. He was like, he helped me get my first test, and then I won't forget, man. Getting that test back when it said positive, I thought my world was over. I really did, dude. I thought literally everything is gonna die.
Yep.
I'm fucked. You
Yep.
know what I'm saying? And luckily I had about not even half of what I had at that time. I probably had about 8 adults, but I tested them all for the whole year. They all, and the only thing that came back positive was the one that died. But then I didn't trust the male that was with her. So he always was separated. But let's kind of get to where somebody, or what do you suggest somebody does the minute they find out they had an animal in their collection that just tested for positive Nido? Like, what's the game plan from there?
I would say it 100% depends on the circumstance. So if this is a house with one pet snake and it's not showing any clinical signs, it's a pet. It's fine. It's not. I wouldn't take any action. If it is a if it is an adult animal going into your breeding colony and you're worried about exposure to other animals, then maybe it's worth euthanizing and not taking the risk, or carving out a subset of your colony and saying, okay, these are the Nido positive ones, or
Mm.
there's really sort of any set of scenarios. So right now I have kind of two main positions. The first is at the university, but I also run an educational center with all the reptiles and stuff like that. And
That's cool.
each one of these buildings here is herpiculture through a different lens. And so one building I have rare species that went through year-long quarantines with gold standard testing, level 10 biosecurity. There's foot scrubbers and automated sanitation routines and like contact time. It's any idea I had on biosecurity, I took it to 10, and I filled that room with obscure pythons because I was worried about them not existing in a place that level of biosecurity. Um, in the context of that colony, they would have to be euthanized. Like there would be no leeway at all. I also have another building that's like animals, and I have tons of positive animals in there that have lived their entire lives subclinical with virus, and I don't think they're ever going to have any problems. They've been bred. I've never been able to see their virus spread to other animals, and so those I just sort of have an understanding with. Um, but that being said, I have plenty of animal, and then I have a third colony that's I call it virus neutral, which is to say that like if I just go testing in there, I won't find anything. But in the middle of breeding season, if a blood python is like extremely stressed out, sometimes I can pick out the faintest genome on our most sensitive test. So I know there is virus in there somewhere. I know I can't get rid of it because we don't have a test that has the sensitivity to get rid of it what I would need to. And so I call that virus neutral. And what I manage in there are clinical disease. And so a positive test in there, I don't like, I manage it very intensely, but the second that animal shows any sort of disease, it's out.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. Like I said, I have three different contexts. In one context, a positive test is just going to live with it so long as the animal is healthy. In another context, the positive test is immediate euthanasia. And in another context, the positive test is just entirely context dependent because it's in a colony of animals I've worked with forever and understand the confines of disease within that population, and
Yeah.
also know that I have no other alternative because I will never be able to get virus all the way out of that colony. And so I don't sell animals out of that colony, but I also have no justification to euthanize a single animal in that building.
So my little gold standard that I have, because I get hit about this all the time, is I don't sell adults. I will never sell an adult. I'm just that's my thing that I would keep. And so, but a baby, I feel so confident a baby is going to do well. It's not going to have Nido, and I'm so happy the fact that I'm confident that I could just sell babies. But is that fair to say that like we know Nido isn't passed on to the babies? I feel like no one said 100% yes. It's always like a 99.9%. Like, are we to the point where we could confirm it now or no?
Not 100%, not to the level of granularity that it's so almost impossible to prove a negative. Like,
Yeah.
it seems very unlikely. There's not a great mechanism for it. We have no evidence to suggest it, but I can name one case in my colony where like I struggle to find an explanation for that wouldn't maybe include vertical transmission as the easiest explanation. But that's not
Yeah.
proof, nor is a ton of negative tests swabbing eggs proof. And so, it doesn't seem like there's vertical transmission. We don't know that, but again, like there's no everyone's looking for absolutes in this conversation, and there is not going to be absolutes in this conversation.
Sorry.
It's
Sorry.
yeah,
Newsflash, guys. Sorry to fucking bust your bubble.
yeah, it is thing one. So like, it probably isn't vertically transmitted. If it does, it's under weird circumstances that like, probably aren't common. But like, let's break down. So green tree pythons are they have one of the highest prevalences of any python species. So what is it about green tree pythons that might make them significantly more prevalent with virus than many other species? And so a lot of it has to do with the same characteristics of small arboreal pit vipers, which is that they have very small home ranges. So like at one point I was doing a data like a meta-analysis of home range sizes in pythons. And the reason was I was curious about how big the home range size of a python in the Everglades was compared to like the Indian pythons in the wild.
Right.
But one thing that stuck out to me were both ends of the spectrum. So a Burmese python in the wild in South Florida has a home range size that's like almost 10 times the size of any other wild python home range. Like they have everything they need, but they really have to move to find it. On the other extreme, you have green tree pythons, which had one of the smallest home range sizes of any python, like sometimes down to like a couple dozen meters, where they're just moving up and down a tree.
Correct.
And so you have a lot of these segmented populations with a lot of cryptic diversity. What we thought was just green snakes ended up being like how many different species and subspecies of green tree python now. And
5.
so yeah. So you have the natural diversity of the pythons themselves, where you have small home ranges, so they get these hyper localized virus strains, and so that's why like maybe half the viruses we have of pythons are coming out of green tree pythons. So you take that as their base biology. Their base biology, because they have small home ranges, they have a lot of virus and a lot of viral diversity. Take that and put it in our captive context. And what do we like to do? We like to cross things from all over the place because we want to make cool looking snakes. That's, problem one. Problem two with green tree pythons is that historically they've been pretty hard to incubate. And so we do a ton of maternal incubation. So there, even if there's not vertical transmission, the mom is sitting there breathing on the babies as they are hatching out. The other problem with green tree pythons is you want to see them change colors. You have no idea how they're going to turn out. And so you keep them in your colony for maybe a year or two to see how they're going to color up before you let them out. And so
Right.
now you have a species with a lot of host diversity high prevalence, maternal incubation, kept in a colony for longer periods of time than many other python species. And you get sort of this perfect disaster of why you might have a really hard time building a virus negative green tree python colony. Baked within that is that young animals are probably going to be way safer than any of the adult animals with a much longer exposure time, almost no matter what source they come from. So selling babies is great and the safest way to go about doing that. And for that, the specifics of green tree pythons historically have almost worked against them for that exact reason.
Yeah, you know, and what other than chondros, like I mean, one of my biggest passions also is emerald tree boas, and I dabbled in imports, dude. Like goddamn man, there's a lot in my freezer that unfortunately didn't make it, like pukers right off the bat. But I was also taught like you don't deal with this type of stuff when they're United States captive born and bred, like, and that's what I realized. I'm like, oh my god, the ones that are produced here, they're not throwing up. They could actually handle big meals, and I was really convinced on why true captive born and bred emeralds are the secret to growing in the hobby, not the imports for whatever reason. But I don't know, like when it comes to Nido and chondros, just because it's captive bred doesn't give you safe of anything. Even with the test, dude, this is why I get people all the time like, hey, this adult's available, and I go, no, don't do it. Like, I just don't do it. Like, oh, it's a killer price. I'm like, yeah, but why is he selling it? Like, to me, it's always a red flag. Like, why is this?
Yep.
Why is this? I don't care if it's an established chondro breeder or someone who just came around the block. Why are you selling a 3-year-old female? Why? Like,
but then, so I fully agree. But then, what makes me nervous as someone who's been in the industry for a long time is that then,
yeah,
by making those statements, is you devalue those adult animals, and I don't like seeing adult animals devalued because that's when you end up with end up with situations where the wrong people end up with the wrong type of animals, and so it's like.
facts.
I look at things from so many different perspectives, and it's like I can pitch why you should never buy an adult animal from a pathogen perspective, and then from a keeper perspective, the other side of me knows that in that statement, I potentially could sentence a lot of adult animals to not have an outlet, and thus that statement kind of is paid for by the animals, and so it's
Yeah.
it's complicated, and that's it's complicated. The world is a complicated place, and so I do my best to provide clarity, but I also try and muddy up the waters at the same time to show just how muddy the waters are, because people make statements that we just don't have anything to back it up.
I don't know if it's just a personality trait, but man, I just like things that are difficult. Like, just, I don't know what it is. Like, and I'm also king of making my own life difficult when I don't realize it sometimes, but it's just like the chondros, the fact that there's just so many question marks still behind everything related to what we're talking about is just so interesting, but also like, I'm glad I'm doing it. I'm glad I'm working up with them. And I'm glad I at least could say I've had a lot of these animals for 8-9 years now. You know what I'm saying? And so, but again, like I don't, and not that I just don't want to sell an adult because that's something I want to breed, but I'm just worried. Like if it's one animal I'm concerned about letting go out of my collection is an adult, especially one of the ones I've had from the beginning. So I'm just like,
it's such a liability to let
no thanks.
adult animals go. And the other thing too is that, like, one thing Eugene always stressed to me is that, like, whenever you see people sell off their colonies, those colonies never ever do as good.
No, it's like you're more likely gonna get a dud. It's not gonna be good. And we talk about this all the time on Tuesday night. We say, man, another reason why like you're trying to get that female is obviously to breed, and it just doesn't work out for the most part. Yeah, it does. It has, I mean, but it's just not, it's just not a fun experience when it doesn't, and on a broad, like across the board, it more likely doesn't happen,
Yep.
But with that being said, I just got to ask you, one of the things people always inquire to me about, and I'm sure this is a topic. I believe you talked to Adam about this on his podcast. Shout out to my boy Adam. But like, obviously there's cleaning supplies that are, that are used with cleaning a quarantine setup or whatever. I've heard some solution of cleaning, it just almost doesn't really do much. And I'm curious, like, what's your go-to? Like, if it came down to someone wanting to know how I should clean my tubs, like, how do I know I'm using the right product where it's actually causing a good thing and not just not doing nothing? You know, how does
So
what's your take?
again, maybe not helpful to think in absolutes anyway, and a lot of it depends on what you're trying to manage for. So what I use is F10 for I use a couple of different things. So for like through sanitizing out a tub where it's like, emptied of bedding and all that, we go through a saponification process. So it goes through like the same thing they use to like sanitize out like big brewer silos or whatever. And so we just have 110-gallon stock tanks with a soap and an acid, and that is a strategy for sanitizing the bigger items. But in terms of like day-to-day maintenance, I use F10. And then uh, in terms of sanitizing between animals, a lot of times I'll use hand sanitizer or like an ethanol.
What about the Blue Dawn soap? And
That's
correct and chlorhexidine, or did I say that right? Chlorhexidine? Did I say that right?
Yeah, so one of the studies that I did was grow multiple strains of serpentivirus in the lab. And the reason why we can make any of these statements is from those viruses we grew in the lab, we killed them with different sanitizers, and we're able to show this type of sanitizer kills it in this amount of time. And basically, for the most part, any of the sanitizers worked very well against serpentivirus. These are not very tough in the environment.
Got it.
And so the biggest factor is contact time. Chlorhexidine worked the least effectively out of any of the ones that we tried, but it still worked just fine. It just worked 100% at 3 minutes and like 90% at 1 minute, versus everything else worked 100% at like 1 minute.
What
So,
about what about the blue dish soap, the Dawn soap?
we actually didn't test that specifically, but that should be fine as well. So the reason these viruses are not that tough is that they're enveloped RNA viruses. And that envelope is basically just like a lipid layer, like a fatty layer. And so if you bust that open, it's pretty much toast. And so Dawn dish soap should bust that open pretty easily as well.
And again, since we're gonna kind of get on this topic, or get wrapped up on this topic here soon before we get into other stuff. Anyone out there is wondering, well, what would be a proper timeline quarantine in your book? Like, in your eyes, when is the proper timeline to quarantine something?
I mean, like, I do a year. There's no downside in doing a year. Like, doing a long quarantine is the cheapest thing you can do as a
Sure.
keeper. Like, it doesn't cost,
Mm.
it costs space. And, as long as you have that, keep it going. There's no downside to breaking it early. I don't feel good about anything short of a year, but at this point, like, I'm not in a rush. There's no, what's a year? What's a year and a half?
Yeah, but then again, one of the things that it's unfortunate, but it's part of like the nature of coming into the hobby in 2026. It's like quicker the better, and it's unfortunate,
well,
but it's like if you're getting into breeding, some of these people are trying to find the fastest way to get there, and I, God bless them, but I'm just saying, I totally agree with you. What more is it out of your fucking pocket to just give this thing a few more months? You know who Warren Booth is, Dr. Booth?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And he was the one always telling me, like, MJ, like, if you really want to quarantine something, 13 months. He would always tell me 13 months minimum, and mainly because he was talking about emeralds, and he was right, totally right. Because I remember I had an emerald that regurged, I think, after almost a year having it, and I thought it was completely fine, and then all of a sudden just regurged, and I was so upset about it, but totally went the Booth way after that when it came to quarantine. But again, you got people that quarantine the way they feel like they see fit, but they just don't understand the circumstances of like longevity side of things, like what could and what will what will at some point,
Exactly. Yeah. So this is hard because the conversation can be had in multiple different ways. It could be the conversation of like, how do I never get any virus at all into my colony, and how do I versus, how do I keep from losing a colony to these viruses? And there's a whole kind of spectrum within that, but cutting corners, rushing things on timelines, buying adult animals to rush into a production, that's how you end up on the short end of getting a problem. Like, your chances are statistically unlikely that and even if it's not Nido, it'll be the next unknown thing. Like, literally today, I discovered a new herpes virus in box turtle and a new adenovirus. Like,
Wow.
the unknown unknowns are just immense.
Now
So
we
like,
that's crazy.
yeah, you do the best you can. It's an imperfect world. Stuff has microbiomes. If you are taking your time and paying attention to the animals and doing the best you can with the technology available, then like, what more could be asked of you? Any scenario you lay out, I can probably stretch a scenario where I can poke a hole in it and something finds its way through.
Yeah.
So you just have to live in a world where that's the case and work backwards from there and saying, okay, well, how do I increase my likelihood that nothing bad happens? And it's like, 3 tests is 3 times better than 1 test, and 1 test is a million times better than no test, and a year-long quarantine is 6 times better than a 2-month quarantine, and all of these stack up, and
Yeah.
the goal is to get your end number of risk as low as you can, but it'll never be zero. And so much of those calculations are going to be unknown, even if you spend years and years and years trying to look at one thing. Like, this is you said you like complicated things, and like, we're talking about serpentivirus or nidovirus, and even just in green tree pythons, the diversity is almost infinite this way. But
Yeah.
this is just the next thing we have a name for. What cracked me up so much about your podcast with Adam Wickens is that he was like, I'm good on the green tree pythons for now. Like, the Nido thing just sort of left a taste in my mouth, but the tree monitors we got in, perfectly fine. Love them. Maybe I'll just keep going with the tree monitors. Like, earlier this year, I found a new species of crypto coming out of a tree monitor
Yeah, you're not
from
safe.
nothing's safe. Like, it's just the diversity is infinite. And so pick your animal, pick your poison, do the best you can. All of these things have limitations, and the unfortunate part is that a lot of those limitations are not easily understandable. Like, I could spend literally hours here explaining why the test I'm doing is different than the tests that are commercially available, and
Yeah.
why that matters, and why it's also really hard for an average person to get that kind of test. It
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Adam's a good buddy of mine, and I talked to him. We spoke right before he was going to get this shipment, and like, the sad thing is, and he's not the only one I've had this deep conversation with of like what to prepare for, like what could, or more in my head, I was like, this is going to go down. I already know it, but I was trying to prepare him for it, and the way I explain it, it almost seems like, well, like, how do you know this so well? But then, like, why is this happening? And I can't explain why. Like, I can't even.
Yep.
All I can tell you is like, one thing looks great until it doesn't, and
Yep.
it's that quick. And I told him, I was like, look for fucking weird looking jaws, look for droopiness, I told him, I was like, these chondros are not perched like a perfect batch of bananas. If they're not tight, and if they're loose, just be ready. And then sure enough, they were every symptom I talked about was happening with every single one. And it just happened one after another, one after another, one after another. And the worst thing that could happen to this poor guy happened. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, fuck, dude.
That is another what you can look for in animals before they actually start getting sick is the gums and the glottis will start to get pinkish.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like, the
right.
texture of the gum looks a little off. Like, what should be a glossy smooth gets like sort of this matte look.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be indicative of a low level infection. So you will see those signs before you see not.
Or, it's crazy also, some of them will tell you the way they breathe. Like
Yes.
you'll hear like little almost clicks sometimes, but also like you almost hear a wheezing, like if you pay attention, and again, and I will tell you, sometimes they're in deep shed, and that's okay. If they're in shed, they just can't breathe, and they're fucking. And I noticed that goes away from what I can tell. I pray to God that's what it was, but it has gone away after it sheds. You know what I mean?
It might be a yes and like it might be worth testing them in that peak of shed, like
who fucking knows? It got its
yeah,
adult.
who knows? But again, does it matter? And in that case,
Yeah.
it probably doesn't.
No.
And so like
Yeah.
how do you? Yeah,
You just pray.
it's a complicated world, and
You just pray.
you pray, you do the best you can, and you
Yeah.
understand that sometimes that's maybe just not going to be good enough, and work backwards from there. Like these are living things, and again, like the diversity is more unknown than it is known. Like
Yeah.
it is a slow week when I do not pull a new species of pathogen out of some reptile. So
Yeah.
the job I'm in now is the craziest job title I've ever gotten.
Let's hear it.
So it is research assistant professor of wildlife disease clinical molecular diagnostics at the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine. And so we test for hundreds of pathogens in hundreds of different species,
Wow.
not just Nido. And so like we are pulling stuff out all over the place. Like I just published a new bacteria that we pulled out of a dwarf sperm whale. Like,
Yeah.
There's been on
Jesus.
studies with like parasites that turn snakes' brains into like Swiss cheese, and there's like 24 other papers in the work at this point. And so like the pathogens that are out there are more unwritten than they are written. And so we can talk specifics about Nido and how you do everything you can to prevent Nido. But I almost, I like to talk about it in the sense of like talking about Nido as a vehicle for talking about all the unknowns we don't know about. And so, testing is great and a tool that I utilize, but I also utilize a really long quarantine and I pay really close attention to clinical signs because that's going to find something just as effectively as testing would in a lot of circumstances.
And another reason why someone asks is why. Well, I wouldn't say this to him just because I wouldn't want to scare him. But like in my head, why I don't want to ever sell an adult is because I don't ever want to have the risk of selling a snake with Nido ever in my life.
Yeah.
I just never in my career, I swear to God, I never want that to come back to me ever. It's like a huge standard for me for that to not to happen. You know what I'm saying? I take it very seriously, and I know I'm safe if I just keep these fucking adults to myself.
Yeah, you're saying, and what you guys absolutely nailed in your conversations were about how testing at your colony before you ship something out is going to be limited in terms of its usefulness versus testing something when it arrives,
right?
for the stress of shipping in your colony. Like again, I have a happy building full of snakes that will test negative all day long, and these viruses are really good at hiding. And unless I give them a reason to come out, they're going to come out. They're not going to,
Yeah, and again, I think there's only a couple customers I sold CHONDROS to this year, and they want a Nido test, and I'm like, hey, here you go. But guess what? I would still test it when it comes. Like, no matter what, like you still have to test it. And they would be like, what do you mean? And that's what's like, how many people out there are just being told, hey, here's a Nido test. God bless, you're gonna be in good hands. No, you're not. Like you got to test again. Like, and there's a lot of it's not being explained to these new keepers. Like they don't know better. They're just like, oh, I got a clean Nido-free snake.
The other problem about Nido specifically with the tests that are available is a lot of people are not paying attention to how the samples themselves are being treated. So like these are RNA viruses. These are very temperature sensitive. The same reason that it's pretty easy to wipe them out is also the same reason that they don't do well being shipped at room temperature in an envelope that's not on an ice pack in an insulated container. Like your samples should be shipped almost the same as you're shipping a snake, but instead of trying to keep it, optimal temperature, you're trying to keep it as cold as possible. Basically, the world is full of things that does nothing but degrade RNA like instantaneously. Like it is made to be nature's post-it note, and somehow these viruses have squeezed out a way to make a living off of that. But like
Wow.
The whole world is designed to just shred these post-it notes. And so, like, if you are sending a swab just in a tube, in an uninsulated mailer, even overnight, like the amount of usable RNA that is left in that sample by the time it even gets to the testing facility is severely compromised.
The variables are just insane. It's just like it's again, you know, you could do everything you can, but you're just not going to be safe overall. Like as of 100% feeling as you think you have, you know. But I got to say one thing, Dr. Tillis, we have some hot seat questions before. I'm sorry, we have some super chat questions, but we got to get to commercial break. So we're gonna cut to commercial real quick. All right, we'll be right back. I see your guys' super chat questions. If anyone else got questions, get them loaded, and we'll ask Dr. Tillis before we get into this part 2. And but be right back after this word from our sponsors. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros. If you want to talk to somebody who likes to put people on the map, you have to go follow TX Chondros on Instagram. He has put on some of the biggest breeders out in Texas out on his platform on Instagram. Also displays some of his own amazing projects on his Instagram. You could also simply go to his website, see what pairings he has going on for this season, and also see his previous productions. Mark has been working with yellow neonates on top of red neonates, and his passion for this hobby is second to none. He's also mentored a lot of people like myself. So thank you so much, Mark Hager, for all your support. And if you guys really want to know how it is about building a community, then you got to go check out Texas Chondros. Thank you so much, Texas Chondros, for all your support. Cannot wait to see what you're all about in the 2026 breeding season. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Shout out to Focus Cube Habitats, the #1 PVC enclosure in the reptile industry. Hands down, everything you guys see behind me are 3x2x2 PVC design enclosures by Steven and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. My entire room at this point, all Focus Cube Habitat enclosures, and that is for a real reason. My reptiles love them. I've had majority of these Focus Cube Habitats behind me for over 6 years now. So guys, if you're looking to expand your reptile room and get yourself some new enclosures, no better place to visit than Focus Cube Habitat. You head over to focuscubehabitats.com and see how many different design enclosures you could choose from. And you can also follow them on Instagram and stay updated with all current new enclosures on their YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Stephen and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. And I think I got new enclosures in the driveway, so I gotta go. Shout out to Focus Cube Habitats. You are the best. All right, guys, we're back. Let's get the likes up, please, because this is a great episode. And, you know, one of the many things I'm sure you already could attest to at this point is like a key indicator to kind of see what level of health your snake has is like pairing it up, putting it under some sort of stressful condition. And what is it you feel like about stress really pushing these things over the line? Like, why is it you would feel like?
So the best understanding we have to how these viruses work in the wild is through a study I did in South Florida with Burmese pythons. And we found in them variable rates of shedding that depends on the time of year. And so they would sometimes go from testing positive, negative, 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 sometimes being negative for months, then be swabbed again and be back to positive. And when they were positive, it was the exact same strain. So there'd be more differences between any two positive Burmese pythons than there would be between Burmese python's first positive test and negative or next positive test, even if there's months in between. And so the natural biology of these viruses is just to kind of be in balance in the background. And when it's really cold, maybe the balance chips a little bit higher towards the virus, where we start to see it in more numbers. We start to see it in more of the population. And then as breeding season ends and it gets warmer and everyone's feeding and back and happy, that virus prevalence kind of dips back down. And so the natural pattern is virus is out there at a pretty high amount, about the same we see in captive populations, which is like 20 something percent, doesn't cause disease, periodically comes and goes in terms of how much is being shed. And if you take that as your sort of background natural pattern of probably what these viruses are doing, and you layer on top of it the high densities that we have in captivity and just the accelerated nature of everything we do, and you could really just sort of feed back into that pattern much more quickly than you'd get in a wild setting. But ultimately, it's still the same pattern. It's just the same pattern occurring in a density, 10 times the amount of snakes. And so
Yeah.
stress probably just is part of the natural cycle of this virus coming a little bit more prevalent. It spreads into another animal but doesn't really cause disease, and that's sort of that. The problem
Yeah.
is when you get hyperdiversity like we have in captive colonies and the potential for immunocompromised stress. So, like when an animal gets sick, the amount of virus that animal is putting out might be literally millions of times more than a healthy animal with the same exact strain. And so, if you're doing millions of times more virus, there's also a million times more chance of replication of a replication error. And if you end up with a replication error that says falls to the walls, you're now in a colony of really dense snakes and it can spread like wildfire. And so, like, a lot of what we're seeing in captivity is probably just an echo of a natural pattern, just in a smaller space.
All right, we're gonna pause this topic for right now. I completely forgot about the super chats. My bad, guys. But these guys got questions for you, Dr. Tillis. Shout out to my boy Lucas. This guy's still a player. He's gonna come on the Trap Talk soon. But his question is, Dr. Tillis, I think anybody in herpiculture with more than 20 animals is truly
Serpentovirus, yeah.
All right, dude. Nidovirus free, basically. In a sense. Do you feel like anyone out there with at least 20 animals could say they have a nidovirus collection, a nidovirus free collection?
It just depends on the circumstance. Like if you were to take any 20 assortment of random adult pythons out there, there's a 0% chance, I think, that you'd end up with 20 negative snakes. If you were talking about a collection of 20 ball pythons that were all bought as neonates from one or two different sources, then absolutely you could probably get away with having a negative collection without any sort of testing, just because the risk is so low. But
Right.
in general, your odds are not good. Some species are more than others. So, like in green tree pythons, I think you would really be hard. Carpet pythons will be hard. Blood pythons will be hard. Ball pythons, their prevalence seems to be a base rate that's lower. Like the ball python diversity we see is less, the prevalence is less, and so statistically, if some species you might actually have an okay shot at it. So it's just super circumstance dependent, and that's not a helpful answer. But yeah.
Have you ever heard of Socrates? He's down there in Florida as well. Ariel
Yes.
Max Emporio.
Yeah, he has the really cool looking ceiling, right?
The PVC wall that it's like a dude, yeah, it's a next level freaking ceiling. It's so dreamy. But he's the one that really taught me, in a sense, like how to test for nidovirus, because he got hit with nidovirus, but it came from his ball python, which was interesting. I was like, damn, like he found out he somehow transmitted from the ball python to one of his chondros, I believe. But then that's when I realized, is like, how many of these ball python people feel like they're all peachy clean and safe when just legit
without the speciation data, which he probably wouldn't have unless he tested it through us, but I don't think he did.
Right.
You don't know. Like, yeah, he had a positive ball python, and also he started testing for other stuff and found positives in them, or that was legitimately what happened. Like when I look at the diversity, I see ball pythons kind of inserted within clusters of other viruses, but less so. So for me, I think it's more likely a lot of the diversity we see starts in the green tree pythons, but even that's not 100%.
So here's the thing: there's been a lot of people coming from ball pythons and getting into chondros. Not all leaving their ball. Like some of them are keeping the ball pythons, but like for instance, you would keep that separate, wouldn't you? If that was you, like if you wanted to get into another species, you're not going to put your chondros right next to your ball python rack. Would you, or would you say you could be fine doing that?
No, I think you'd be fine doing that with reasonable biosecurity. I think you'd be totally fine. I have a room. My virus neutral colony has green tree pythons in it that include animals I think are positive, and right next to perfectly healthy ball pythons. But I'm really not worried about the circumstances that disease would occur in that scenario. That being said, if I had any sort of clinical animals in there, it's different. Like again, like a sick your average positive ball python that's healthy and shedding at a low viral rate is probably not a risk to your average healthy green tree python that might also be positive and shedding virus at a normal rate. But if you get an immunocompromised ball python that's has a million times more virus and a million times more mutation, then the jury's out a lot more. And so like,
Yeah.
I can make general rules for healthy animals and why you'd probably be totally fine keeping green tree pythons and ball pythons together. And I do that, and I don't lose sleep over it. But I can also create a scenario where that is a problem. But
Yeah, me too.
you can probably hit some benchmarks of saying there's going to be a problem before it reaches that level. And so if you're staying on top of your animals and really keying in on clinical disease, so again, that's what I care about in that building is
Yeah.
I care about disease. And in that situation, I feel relatively safe.
I just, man, like, okay, first and foremost, like, how's your biosecurity? Like, have you been tested? Like, I just know people think they're doing something that they're really not, right? And again, like, and I know people have bad days where they're not being so careful. Like
Yep.
we got to think about pilots that just fall asleep or some shit, or like people who are normally doing a pretty dangerous job, but they're good at doing it, and there's that one day they fucking slip up. And I feel like that could happen easily, having so many things close together. Especially room to room in a hurry. Like it scares me to even think about someone who's had ball pythons for a long time in their collection, and never really quarantine. Because let's be real, they don't really quarantine. Like they say they do, but they don't. It goes right into their breeder rack and they're ready to go. And so, like with Socrates' situation, which we don't really know for sure, was it the ball python that did that to the chondro? But like for me, dude, fucking, I keep it all separate. I really do. Only because, again, if I could stop any kind of wildfire from happening, I'm going to stop it now. And that way I just don't have to deal with it,
Yeah. And so again, a lot of it just depends on risk appetite and what you mean by separate anyway. Like, I keep
true.
them in the same room, but I'm swapping gloves between the racks and sanitizing with ethanol between each animal and doing F10 with the equipment. And so like,
Yeah.
like even with the sanitizers I use, like ethanol is better at some things, F10 is better at other things. And so using both in conjunction at separate points in the process, like you're just building layers and with the understanding that like it's probably not going to be bulletproof, but like the thicker
Yeah.
your layers are, the better you are. And so like, if you don't have ball pythons and green tree pythons in the same room, then your risk is much lower than if you had them in the same room together. If you have them in the same room together, your risk is much lower if you're swapping gloves and sanitizing and stuff like that than if you had them sitting on top of each other. Like you can, you get it. You understand what I'm saying.
No, 100%. And you're right. Like what's really separate, right? Like it all depends what you're doing, where you think you're separating things. And if it's not in a completely different room with two different doors, I mean, it's kind of not separate, but you could do your best. And I just do my best. Like my room is split in half where I have a wall dividing things, but it's still kind of open. And so I just do my best. Like the way I work my room is like, if it's a ball python day, I do the ball pythons, I work out, shower, then I come back on this side of the room and I'll never do the ball python. I won't be on the ball pythons for the rest of the day. And I do my best to do that. And I'm not perfect. There's times somebody comes over and I'm like, oh, look at this ball python. Next, I broke that rule. So it's like, you're right. Like you try your best,
Yeah, and then at a certain point, like, is it even fun? Like, if you can't take people into your snake room and show them a green tree python and a ball python in the same day, like, what are we doing here? And so, like,
you're right.
yeah. So, like, so I try and live on the planet Earth, and so, like, again, like, I can, what I have tried to do with my facility here is provide a full suite of potential strategies for biosecurity, and all of them have pros and cons. And it's not an instructional, here's how you do this. It is, let's have this conversation. Here's all the variables that I have put in to managing disease in all of these different contexts. And which one of these do you resonate most with? Which one of these can you afford? Which one of these is realistic? And like, there is no manual. People think there's a firm way that's been written, and if you deviate from that and end up with Nido, like you've done something wrong. And it's just not like the Burmese pythons in South Florida didn't do anything wrong, and they're just out there spreading virus. Like that's just and when we screened the Burmese pythons, we also screened native snakes because we were worried about their viruses, and we didn't find any python viruses, but we found their own colubrid nidovirus. And so, like, it just then there's a branching off point of a conversation there. Like, it just, we can take it as far as you want to go, and you can drive yourself kind of crazy with it. But I try to I want snake keeping to be fun too, so I try and keep it balanced.
I hear you, dude. And honestly, like if it came, okay, so I have this event I throw for my Patreon members called Trap Fest, and I just invite a bunch of friends over. I brought everyone who's been supporting me. I throw one big party. And when they're here, yeah, I'm careful, but dude, I don't give a shit. Like I'm
Yep.
showing them everything I can. And I almost feel like I'm just try to be as safe as possible so I could do this when people come over and I don't need to worry about it, But then again, once those people are gone, I go back to original business. But I can never be that way where I'm like, sorry guys, I've already checked that room today and we can't go over there. And you guys maybe need to come back on a Thursday morning or something. Like I don't know. I really don't care once I'm in the moment and people are here. And again, even myself, man, I do my best. And I want to also be real with myself too, because as much as I try to be safe, it's like, dude, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I mean, and honestly, like, I don't think it's bad to think of risk as again, like, not a binary yes or no thing. It's like you're careful the rest of the year, so you have a budget of biosecurity that you kind of spend on those days. And yeah, I can poke holes in the risks of that day, but the benefits you get are outside of that, and that's certainly better than if you were doing that risk every single day.
Yeah.
And so, like here, my biosecure python colony, like, people don't come inside it. It has glass windows and they can look in and see the pythons. The display building, come right in. Everyone come in. It's fine. And so again, different context, and each one of those is a different level of insanity, but it's
I will say all my RSVPs, I go through a personal screening and think, do they have Nido in their collection?
yeah, it's really, that's a might scare
But,
me,
yeah,
honestly.
you know what? You're not invited. I saw Mike's one of your pictures the other day. I'm good. No, you're right. All right, let's get to this other hot seat question. Or sorry, I keep saying hot seat. This other super chat. My boy Ryan here says he has two-part question here. So, do we know what the mode of transmission in aerosol, droplet, or fomite?
Yeah.
Did I say that right? Okay.
Yep.
Do you know what the mode of transmission is?
Not definitively, but our best guess based off of common sense is that it's, and again, I can kind of pitch two scenarios here. So your average case in your average wild animal that we probably see reflected in our average asymptomatic but still positive snakes, we probably get transmission from prolonged contact, like a slow burn, like over the course of a breeding season.
Right.
And so normally that is probably how it is transmitted. Where you might have an accelerated transmission is like when we talked about with an immunocompromised animal. And so then, even though it's not airborne, but if that animal is producing like a million times more virus, the chances of it being spread by a fly, by you, by anything go up a lot. And so, like, it's sort of a sliding scale of risk. Like, the risk of transmission for your average non-clinical case probably takes a really long time, probably takes like the span of a season or a year. And that's how you end up with a colony with sort of its own host adapted microbiome strain of Nido. But you then can also get those really intensely clinical animals that's maybe paired with a bacteria, and that can spread like wildfire and knock out whole collections in a matter of a week. And at that point, like, we don't really know if it's just the virus mutating is more pathogenic, there's more virus, and so it just has more of an opportunity to spread. There's more fomites to spread. So we don't know. But the fomites are basically just any sort of particulate that carries the virus with it, so like saliva or anything like that.
Not gonna lie, I had a Google Fomite. First time I ever heard that one. But yeah, glad I got that knowledge down. Second part of the question here. Can you talk about interspecies or genus transmission and infectivity?
We know that it happens. We know that it happens more so with other species, with some species than others. And besides that, like, not really. It's anyone's best guess. We chip away at that understanding by doing speciation in addition to just positive or negative. So like a test through us is not just positive or negative, but it's the actual speciation of the virus. And so that is how we are kind of starting to narrow that gap a little bit, but there's so much diversity, and it's really hard to say where the mutations are occurring that are limiting host range. There are some trends that seem very host specific, and there are some trends that don't. So like in the genus of serpentivirus that we see most in captive pythons, which is pagodavirus,
Yeah.
there's probably about, I don't know, at least 20 different species within that, probably in about a dozen different clades, and like each one of those clades has a green tree python in it, but only like two of them will have a ball python in it. And then like way divergent over here is a virus I pulled out of a popwin, like popwin
Mm.
python, like the olive pythons that people call
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
And so like that's a very divergent virus that is probably only found in that host. But I can also have a whole soup of virus diversity that can infect anything from green tree pythons to ball pythons, and there's probably restrictions within that. You have some strains that are like in a bunch of different species. You have some strains that are just seem to be limited to Morelia. So we don't know, and every strain is probably likely to have a slightly different story. We just don't have, like, again, I make the comparison to COVID, where COVID is like one species of virus, and we're talking about, did it jump from pangolins? Did it jump from, bats? Did it jump from people? And then like that's one species of virus, and we're talking about probably 100 different species of virus in here from 7 different genre of virus. Like there's just so much diversity, and so each one of these could have potentially drastically different host ranges. Some of them seem very limited, some of them do not. I guess I should say that all of them seem limited within the greater taxa. So, like, we see colubrid viruses and colubrids, we see viper viruses and vipers, we see python viruses and pythons. That, for the most part, stays true. But even within that general rule, I can point to like a lizard virus in the middle of a group of python viruses. And so, like, at some point, they can spill over into very different hosts, but when that does happen, it's like something that happens rare on the genomic evolutionary level, but it can happen. And so it's like,
Yeah.
I can make a rule that most python viruses stay within pythons, except for one in every 500 years when they spill over into a lizard, and then that causes a different branch and causes its own cascade of stories and own 50 COVIDs that have their own. Yeah. Yeah, it just, I could spend a lifetime working on this, and even if I were just working on one species of Nido, it would be such a small portion of the pie of the diversity that's out there, and I still don't know that I could make any firm statements that were anything beyond just, yeah, we found that this strain can do this X, Y, and Z.
Fuck, dude. If he would have asked me those questions, me direct, I wouldn't know what the fuck he's even asking. I wouldn't. I would be like, what do you mean? But guess what? At the end of the day, it's just not that easy. What you're asking.
No, it's unfortunately it's not. Unfortunately, it's not, and so I will say that all of the studies that I have been involved in, I have 4 published Nidovirus studies, and all of them are publicly available for you to read free of charge.
That's awesome.
And I am, at this point, begrudgingly admit myself as a trained scientist, but like I'm first and foremost a reptile keeping idiot. And so like I wrote these so that I could understand them before I had to deal with all of this, at least to the furthest extent I could. So,
Yeah.
like, the cutting edge of Nido is not hidden. It is published and available to the best that we currently have it.
I need to get those links. I'll put them in the description below too, just so people could just go click on them as well. I'll get them from you after the show. But yeah, thanks for the super chats, guys. I want to get back to what we were talking about, as far as like looking at indicators that kind of kick in this Nido symptom where you could visibly see it. So kind of going back to what I was taught, if I were to see a situation where, there's a little bit of RI going on, right? A little bit of mouth open or wheezing or whatever. Obviously my thing is I like to test it, right? But from what I've seen, that has helped this case maybe 8 out of 10 times, especially with emeralds, because this would happen to me sometimes with my males, for whatever reason. But putting them in the incubator or putting them in a warmer setting or kicking up some sort of heat, like the heat, I feel like consistently for a couple days kicks it. Sometimes it takes, like I've had some emeralds where it took them a month. Like I almost had them and I have a walk-in incubator, by the way. It's not like a little box. So yeah. I had them in a room where it's consistent, like about 87 or 88. I think I had it at. Sometimes I even went to 90, I feel like, if it was really bad. But just leaving them in there would put them in shed after a week or so. And then the shed would it'd be gone after the shed. And then I'll just put them right back. And for the emeralds, for the most part, that's always worked. I've never had an issue. Chondros, I've only had to do that a couple times, and it's 50-50. One, the girl she just didn't make it. The other girl, she bounced back like nothing happened, and she's still here, and she's great. Won't ever sell her, but I'm just saying, she's here, and she's great. So what's the deal with the heat? What's the deal with the heat being a factor? Because I've heard this before. I've heard other people working with some of this experiment. There's a guy named Albert in Europe working with ball pythons. He has a huge list of things he's been working on that. And I guess out of the 80 something he had positive is now negative after doing some sort of heat experiment. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so we are actively working on a treatment study that involves heat. And so when that information is available, it'll be publicly posted and people will have access to it. There's a lot that gets me excited about it. There's a lot that makes me nervous about it. I will say that you should temper the expectations to this being a complicated picture. A lot of what we've gone over today is very complicated, and a lot of that is confounded in a study such as this. And I don't think the answers are going to be as simple as people want them to be, but we want to make sure we have the best data available to make sure we have the most complete picture available. And so one of the two things that we've talked about a lot today are mutation and the difficulty of detecting mutated strains on a test.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you tell if an animal is cured or if an animal has a mutated strain that your test can no longer detect, or if the animal is just periodically shedding and has dipped into a period where it's no longer shedding enough to test positive on your test? And so there's a lot of reasons a snake could test negative besides it being negative, and we really want to make sure that these snakes are negative is thing one. Thing two is that we can grow these cells on we can grow these viruses on mammalian cells at reptile temperatures. And it would not be good to find out that the only barrier that's keeping us from getting Nido is that it can't, replicate at warmer temperatures. So if we start selecting for stuff that does well in heat, then not only is any sort of potential treatment immediately no longer going to work because we have heat resistant strains, but it might also break down a potential barrier that we don't even know about that prevents us from getting sick. Because again, I can show you points in the evolution of these viruses where big jumps occur like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we really want to make sure for any sort of check like that, the issue of mutation is addressed fully and that these animals are fully negative. And up until now, the test to do that just hasn't existed. And so a lot of what my new job has been working with new technologies. And a side effect of that is that I have managed to solve some of these problems. And so now it's doing the lab work and getting the data out there. So it's coming. There's information available. Temper your expectations. It won't be simple. And because it won't be simple, and because you don't have tools to even address if it works, and we don't know what the risks are for heat resistant, we should wait until there's a full picture put out before people start experimenting on their own. Because again, I have done everything I can to paint how many unknowns there are out there, and we could potentially not be doing ourselves any favors if we step in prematurely. So
No, of course.
thankfully, in the process of all of this, the outcome is better testing. The outcome is better speciation. And now I look at the types of tests that I can run, and I feel very confident on the type of answer I get out of those animals, whether they are truly negative or not. Now it is taking that test and waiting out those animals to see, do they ever, or do they stay negative?
Yeah, and again, what's the big picture even? I don't know. It's for me, man. I don't know. I feel like I'm just better off just thinking everything already has it, and I'm just gonna act as if.
Yeah,
like, just move on with your life.
I think there will be options in the future for tools that become available for dealing with situations that become problematic. Expect to do that in conjunction with a vet, because it's just not going to work like people want it to. Um, I don't think it'll be the end of the story, but I think it'll be another tool in the chest, and we're starting to build up some good tools, and so you just keep on layering it.
Shout out to my boy from Sweden. He brought up a good question here, because I'm curious. One of the things that are very popular right now, especially in ball pythons, is the ability to shed test. Shout out to RGI, one of my sponsors. But shed testing has revolutionized the whole ball python game with not having to buy pos hets and all that stuff, right? Will we ever get to the point, like especially stuff, let's say a lot of your research kind of goes into your favor here. Will we ever get to the point of maybe doing like some sort of like home kits that we could do to ourselves and not have to turn into a laboratory? Will that ever happen? Like, will there ever get to a point that could be a process that could be done within ourselves?
Not that I would trust. There's some things that maybe we would get to that point, but Nido won't be one of them. And the reason is the diversity. There's, so the reason shed testing is so effective is that you can ship sheds in an envelope, and it's not going to degrade the DNA overnight or however long it takes to get there. And you're looking for very specific mutations in a very short segment of a gene that doesn't vary a whole lot.
Yeah.
This is the opposite problem. This is hundreds of species that vary a whole lot. The concept of a species doesn't even work. Like, you have a quasi species, like 5% differences are cut off for a species, but like this and this are 5% divergent, but there's one that's 3% divergent from both of them. So what is that? Like, these two are the same species, but these two aren't, but these two are the same species, but these two, like, it's just you can't even put these things in boxes,
Again, it's just not that easy, guys. The hell are you gonna do? And kind of leading into our next topic here, I want to kind of go back. Let's kind of go back a bit when you were talking about how people rely on certain test companies. Like I've been using RAL for I don't know how long now. RAL's always been my go-to, mainly because it's the most affordable. And again, I feel like a lot of people use RAL. But like, there's Fish Head Labs, right? I don't really know other than taking them to a legit university, like to yourself. I feel like those are our two options. What would you use either one if you didn't have the access that you had, or what would you recommend for people out there? Like, what do I tell my customers to use? None of them are a sponsor, so fucking say whatever you want, dude.
Yeah. For Nido, there's not a commercially available test that I would feel
comfortable,
confident in saying an animal is negative from.
Wow.
That being said, like a $25 insurance policy is better than nothing, but it's also,
what's it really doing?
It's doing better, more than nothing. Like, again, like if it detects a lot of the strains pretty well, that's better than it detecting no strains at all. And so, like, again, if you think of all of these as not 100%, but just, if that detects 50% of the viruses, you've still cut your risk by half. And that's better than nothing. We just don't know what that number actually is. But it's better than 0. So, but yeah, it is. But by the same token, there are commercially available tests out there for other pathogens that have very stable genomes that are DNA based that don't mutate very heavily, and there's no difference in their test than our test. Like it's the same. We'd use the same strategy, and so it's unfortunately like a lot of these are very pathogen dependent, and we fall into an uncomfortable box with Nido specifically that other pathogens don't necessarily fall into. And so it might be a perfectly acceptable testing strategy for them. But for Nido specifically, there's not a great test out there. There are tests that are better than nothing. And if you're balancing risk, it should be a part of that equation. Like, I don't want to ever give off the impression that I'm saying testing doesn't matter or that you shouldn't trust it, because they're tools. And it's a little bit more limited of a tool for solving the problem of Nido than it is for solving the problem of shed testing, but it's still a tool.
But from what I noticed between the two companies, Fishhead is more money to test with. Is there
They're
a
more
reason,
money.
a reason with that? Like, is it because they check for more Nido viruses, like strains of Nido, or what? Why would it be more money, you think?
I just don't know the specifics of either of those tests to make
Got it.
statements as to what the differences are. Typically, yeah, I'm not speaking from an informed place to make a distinction as to what the differences come in between price. That being said, like, I do know the Fishhead's test would be closer to our test than WoW's. Like, they use their own kind of reagents and their own processes for streamlining things, which saves them quite a bit of money, but also isn't necessarily having the same reagents coming through the same vendors that are doing the, again, we can probably get into boring specifics as to what might be differences in cost and if that makes a huge difference, but functionally both of them are using pretty close to the same technologies. I don't know if they're using the same exact protocol, but they're both using the same general technology, which we have found can very easily and frequently miss even mildly divergent strains of serpentavirus.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like if you're that geeked out over testing, if Fishhead is doing something more, then that should matter. Like that should, if you really want to be so serious about having a clean collect, because some people are obsessed over it. Like some people really think because they test every 3 months, they're fucking in the clear and there's nothing they need to worry about. And they still shower after every feeding and shit. And that's great. But like, dude, like it's just it's just not that like, okay, you got to test, you're good. It's not, I don't know.
So you can do that, and I would applaud it.
Cool. Me too.
Where
I encourage it.
where I would hit the pause is where they say, and because of that, my collection is Nido free. Because, like, again, I can point out the holes in that strategy down to the specific test strategy that you're using as to how you could have something that falls through a crack there. Whether it causes a problem if you're doing showers and testing everything, like the type of keeper that is taking things to that level anyway, like even if you had a positive that slips through the cracks, like what are the set of circumstances that slipping through the cracks can wipe out that whole colony in the collection of a keeper who is that intense about their animals? Like they're checking it every day. Like there's not a thing that goes wrong in any other animals before it doesn't reach their radar, let alone make it into the cage of another animal. And so like, like it's it's such a complicated world to say like testing is a tool and has limitations and you can hit those limitations very easily with RNA viruses. And also, if you are the type of person who is taking these lengths, you're probably also the type of person who is probably going to end up with a better outcome anyway, just because you're doing the right things in the best way you can. Even if it's not perfect, it's still going to be X% better than baseline, and any
Yeah.
multiplier of that is a plus.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, God, if you doesn't if you want to be as safe as possible, go for it, you know.
Yeah. Again, I have done that route. I have spent exceptional amounts of money to make a building of a colony of snakes that are, you know, about half the world's python species that have been tested multiple times with the best test available and year-long quarantines. Like, you can take it that far, and you know, but to pitch that as the only way to do it or the right way to do it, or you know, there are other ways that'll probably still end up with an outcome. Herpetoculture is not burnt to the ground yet.
Well, with that being said, I kind of have a couple wrap-up topics for tonight. You know, I know we've talked so much about, you know, all your experience, all your research, everything that you're devoted to when it comes to nidoviruses and other viruses in the reptile hobby. But personally, man, like what are some of the things you're stoked about keeping? Like, do you have breeder goals? Like, do you have projects you're working on? Like, I know I saw some video footage, or I forgot what Adam did with you, but he showed off a lot of your fucking animals, man. Like,
Oh yeah,
you
no,
got some beautiful stuff, dude. So I want to kind of geek out about that a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that you're very passionate about keeping today? And do you have anything that is a part of the breeding goals of what you have going on? Let's get into that.
oh yeah, no, I have a ton of stuff. I think I probably have close to north of 200, probably south of 300 pythons in the colony right now. And it's a wide mix of species. Like I said, I have one building that's a lot of diverse pythons. Most of what I do commercial morph breeding wise are blood pythons and short tail pythons. So I have a lot of projects that I've taken wild caught animals and established and worked in new mutations and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
This year I'm most excited. So I produced a clutch of Halmahera pythons 2 years ago.
Wow.
I think I have a really good shot at producing them again this year. I have a chance at, actually, I think I have a female Moluccan python that is out of the same clutch as some of the Moluccans you had at least at one point.
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, you have some of those?
Yeah, I have a female from, I think that same, yeah. There was one captive bred
Cool.
clutch X number of years ago that had axanthics and not axanthics in it, and I have one of those.
Yeah, I had a
And
pair.
I think, they're all coming from the same, yeah.
Yeah.
I think she should have a pretty good shot at having a clutch this year.
Wow.
I have a bunch of locality retics, but I can't breed those anymore. I don't think I'll pair the Timor pythons this year, but they're almost there. Papuan pythons, the Papuan olive pythons. My pair is ready, like more than ready this year, but I haven't decided if I'm willing to put myself through the risk of losing one of those animals.
Yeah.
And then both northern and southern green tree pythons, I'll probably throw a pair of them together this year. Yeah, I have like just all sorts of fun products around here. I have like giant tortoises, I have parrots, I have monkey tail skinks and diamondback terrapin and you know all sorts of stuff. But so the state Florida that is prohibited a lot of my large constrictors back in 2020. And so I was basically given 90 days to build an educational center, rehome them out of state, or become a criminal. And one of the retics, yeah, it is Florida. So, but one of the retics was actually serpentivirus positive, but it had been positive its whole life and never spread it. And so, like, I didn't feel good about rehoming it. I didn't feel good about killing it.
Yeah.
And so I built an educational center. And so
Wow,
I have an
that's
educational center that is open for private tours. And so because of that, I have a whole sweep of fun animals that I keep on top of the pythons and stuff like that.
Did you fund that educational building, or how'd that work? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, no, it was like super pricey. It was there was no easy way to do it other than just saving money, and I had a good you know, I had been breeding snakes for a while, and so I had a lot of the infrastructure and stuff in place already.
Wow.
And then a lot of it is just I built this facility by hand.
That's so neat, man.
Yeah,
Dude,
it was very cool, but it was very scary too at the same time of like,
sure.
I don't know if they're going to approve this facility. I don't think there's very many private keepers left in the state. I don't know of any.
Wow. That's so neat, man. I think, you know, I haven't said this because it's been a long time since I've dreamed about this, but I wanted at some point become like a nonprofit where I go to schools or like I like teach like the younger generation about them. You know what I mean? And like later on in my life, like once I'm more kind of older and stuff, I've always wanted to do that. And educational center sounds so cool. Obviously, it sounds scary, but I don't know. I'm gonna have to talk about you about some someday.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and especially because of the circumstances that I have, it's certainly not profitable. But
Yeah. Well, yeah, I
you
wouldn't do
know,
it for profit. There's no way. I would just
there's no way, yeah. But with a lot of what I have customized my tours for is a lot of like school groups, especially pre-vet groups, and so much of the facility is themed on biosecurity through the lens of herpiculture and nidovirus. Um, there's a ton of like vet students and stuff that make it through that are going to be future reptile veterinarians that get to have experience with animals they otherwise wouldn't, and all of that sort of stuff. So it was sort of, I took it, it wasn't on my bucket list, but when the circumstances required it, I turned it into something that I've really enjoyed. And
yeah.
I put information from a perspective out that is certainly just not available anywhere else.
Yeah, man. And again, like more information is only due to come out as we continue. This isn't like an open and shut case whatsoever. It's just like, like you said, it's gonna probably take a lifetime with a lot of this stuff, to be
Yeah,
honest.
and again, like it's with Nido, we framed so much of the conversation today around pythons, but
Yeah.
and I talked about the vipers, but we also have multiple colubrid viruses. We have chameleon viruses. We have skink viruses. We have turtle viruses. Like the problem with Nido is there's a cow.
What about monitors? I'm sorry, like the tree monitors and like the
Haven't
Asian
found them
monitor?
yet. Yeah,
Okay.
haven't found them yet, but also haven't been looking for it yet. So like
Okay. Mm.
when we do have a lizard nidovirus test, but that's based off of the chameleon and skink one.
Mm-hmm.
But those
Okay.
were very, very divergent. But yeah, it's the more we find, the more we find. And so like, yeah, we're talking about this today, but next month we might find a genus and Lord knows what, and we are talking about this in monitors or who knows what. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of diversity, and this is not just a Python problem. It's a reptile problem, but when you back out to that level, there's a lot of things that are reptile problems, and you can't know them all.
That's a fact. Before I get to my last topic, I'm gonna get this super chat question in for Crisis Corpse. What a name. What is the mortality rate for Nido? If an animal tests positive, can they live a full life or will it shorten its lifespan? And I think we kind of touched on this, but why don't you go ahead and answer for this individual, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it's almost an impossible scenario, like question to answer. Like I've had green tree pythons that come in from a shipment that are positive and dead within a week and a half, and
Yep.
I've had positive for me. I have a positive retic that, like I said, it's been positive for. It has to have been positive for over a decade now at this point, and it's never spread its virus. I don't think I don't think it'll ever show clinical signs. I've tried to grow its virus in the lab, and its virus isn't strong enough to grow in the lab. Like it just doesn't grow in the cells. It's kind of pretty weak. And so like those are two very different outcomes. And just having a piece of paper that says positive is there's a lot of the story that is being erased from the viral diversity component when we just say positive or negative.
All right. Well, listen, before I want to hear that forest story. Before we do, I want to ask you this question. What is it like to be so close to Eugene Bet? That's one of the most impressive individuals I've ever met in my entire life. Like he had some good, awesome things to say about you. But I have to bring him up on this episode. Like what's your relation to the guy? Like how does it feel to know him and all that stuff? And have you learned a lot from Eugene throughout the years?
Yeah, Eugene's obviously very intense.
Yeah, I love that.
And truly, cut from his old mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started working for Eugene when I was 18, and I think I met him when I was 16. I was at a Reptile Expo, and I had a clutch of green tree pythons that I had produced on the table. And this was back
Wow.
when he was known for green tree pythons, and he was like, "Oh, those are nice looking green tree pythons. How would you come up to my facility?" And so I made it up there when I was 16. His farm is pretty close to the University of Florida, so when I came up here for undergrad, the property I ended up buying is like less than a half mile from his place, and so started working there as an 18-year-old just dumping tubs. But he gave me the freedom and leeway to kind of have a lot of control over many aspects of his colony, and that sort of just spiraled in complexity for building really elaborate databases. And the amount of animals, the scale of data that we can pull out of that facility is just unlike anything else. And the more we pulled, the more we fed back into it, the more it kept going. And so like the
Yeah.
reason I got into grad school is because I basically already had a master's project kind of ready to go coming out of my work with Eugene's facility anyway. And
Wow.
so because I my background was in wildlife, I actually am not pre-vet in any way, and so this vet stuff is very new for me. I've had to learn quite a bit. Mm. And so what helped me is that I had already sort of built a project from the data system out of this colony, and that turned into a master's project, which turned into PhD funding, which turned into Dr.Tillis. And so, I can't. I have a very long reptile story that you know almost feel like the Forrest Gump of reptiles. Like I've been in the room where a lot of cool things happen, and that was one of those rooms where a lot of cool things happen.
Right.
And because of that, I've been able to spin that off into where I'm at now. So Eugene's very intense. I like working for Eugene. Eugene is also very intense, and working for Eugene is it's very intense. But he gave me a lot of freedom with this colony, and because of that, it really fed into something that was great for really both of us. And that colony has turned into something that is really a force. And a lot of that was the data component of it, and a lot of that data component of it was him giving an 18-year-old free reign to fuck his data system, and it worked out.
Yeah. Listen, there's not a lot of people you meet, like especially like the lead, like a fucking pioneer like Eugene Bet, right? Like hearing that he's intense makes me feel so happy because I'm intense. And I sometimes always feel like I'm the only intense person I know, but I'm not. And it makes me feel so happy that there's people like Eugene Bet who are intense, and it's okay to be intense, I guess. No, man. Yeah, but shout out to Eugene. But why don't you give me that forest story? I want to hear it.
Oh yeah, um, so at a certain point in time, I was trying to send regular shipments of blood pythons to the ham show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a shipment I sent over. When I looked at the airfare, it was like stupid cheap to Ham, Germany. And so I decided I would fly over with the shipment. Um, Flew over with the shipment. We're in Ham in Germany is kind of like the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, okay.
Um, it's like the whole expo is in like this battle auction auditorium. Like it's quite the setup. Um, so we are in Ham, Germany. We've just flown like 13 hours. I'm dealing with trying to hand over, tens of thousands of dollars of animals for this export. Um, and as we're waiting in the lobby for the customer to show up, I hear a familiar voice, and I turn around, and it's Forrest Fanning and Cody Bartolini that had flown over to Ham as well because the airfare was like $300. And so all of us, without knowing it, had booked airfare to Ham, stayed in a hotel that was not close to Ham, like even a little bit, because it's in the middle of nowhere. Happened to both be at the same hotel, happened to both be in the lobby at the same time, and turn around and there's Forrest Fanning and Cody, and shot the
Oh,
shit with them
wow.
for better parts of an hour. But it just, the last thing you expect to see when you are on the opposite side of the world in a hotel lobby and turn around and there's, someone you're used to seeing fairly regularly at the time. I feel like I was seeing him at all the NARBCs and such.
That's awesome. The reptile world, as small as it is, sometimes it doesn't seem so small. You just ran into people that because of reptiles. And that's everything other than geeking out over what we just talked about, keeping side, man, just knowing people, you know, like the relationships that you would never have if it wasn't for reptiles, which I feel like I'm always in debt to the reptiles because of the life it brought me. Like, you know, getting to talk to people like yourself, you know, and just knowing other Florida keepers and people on the other side of the country, even all over the world, dude. I got people I talk to that are fucking all over Europe, you know, South Africa, like everywhere, Asia. I talk to people in Japan now, man. It's a beautiful
No,
place to be a part of.
it's a very interesting common denominator, especially in the rooms where I find myself now, where like, you know, it's super academic and yet still very reptile focused. Like, you know, the people I get to hang with now are like the people who write the textbooks that the reptile veterinarians are reading. And so it's just so interesting to see the sweep of diversity of people that are drawn into reptiles and how that interest can manifest itself at any number of different forms. And it's, you know, my parents, when I was really building a colony at a young age, they were, you know, skeptical about it. But the thing that kept them supporting was meeting interesting people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And, you know,
Yeah.
I pull that thread and I follow it all the way to where I'm at now, which is, you know, PhD and professor, and quite frankly, all of that is just from playing around with snakes. Like I didn't have a plan. I just followed what was interesting and what became relevant to my life, and so much of that came from the people I was around through this hobby, supplying perspective that you just don't get elsewhere.
Man, I've had people laugh at me almost like, why say I take this so seriously. And I'm like, well, it's kind of my life. And it brought me a life. It brought me a career, actually. And I fucking love it. I love everything about it. So I think everyone's level of seriousness is different depending your circumstance of who you are. But I love that I'm this obsessed over keeping reptiles. I really do. I don't want no
Yeah,
other life.
and
I don't.
I do remember a conversation Eugene and I had one day of where I was like, this is truly and fundamentally, when you look at it zoomed out, a ridiculous way to make a living. Like it really is. These are mutant snakes that were breeding and selling to like people or feeding back into that system. Like it's just it is ridiculous that the hobby is in the form that it's in now.
Yeah.
Grateful for it, but it's been, you know, my first clutch of snakes was 2009, and I've watched it change a lot.
Pre-social media, dude.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
it's
now,
very different.
yeah. All right. Listen, I got shout out to my boy Ben, and you can answer this as quickly as possible or sum it up because this is kind of an easy one. I feel like, you know, people think, or is Nido the only thing you should be worried about? Like, is Nido the only thing that could wipe people's collections? And his question is, do you think Nido is actually what causes people to lose their entire collection of green tree pythons over a couple month period of time? Or do you think it was something else? Like, I mean, it's more than just Nido, isn't it? Like that you should be concerned about, I feel like.
It's more than just Nido that you should be concerned about. Um, so much of it is just species dependent. So like
Yeah.
through our diagnostic lab, we offer a panel of different pathogens that are like the most common things we see in pythons or turtles or whatever. And, you know, for there are other pathogens out there that are a lot scarier. Right now, serpentovirus can certainly wipe out a colony, and there's plenty of stories of that, but it is not the only thing. And there are certainly other things out there that could do that that would be way harder to manage. Some of them are not published yet, so I can only allude to them. Others of them are, you know, like I said, there's a lot of diversity out there.
Sure is, man. Listen, what a great episode. I want, how many green tree python clutches have you had? Right, I had.
I think I've had 3 or 4 over the span of
but at
however
16,
long it's been.
at
Yeah,
16,
the first one was at 16. Yeah.
okay, well, listen, when you have time in your busy schedule, I want to invite you back on a Tuesday night, which is called All in the Tree Tuesdays with Bill Stiegel and Marshall Mendez. And maybe we could talk green tree pythons on that episode, if you're okay with that. I would love to have you back
Oh
on.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a Morelia year. The things I added to quarantine this year were a pair of rough scale pythons and some carpets. So it's
All right.
yeah. I still have some fun stuff that I play around with.
All right. Well, listen, this won't be the only time we'll see Dr. Tillis. That's a fact. I'm so happy we got this episode in, man. I learned a lot. This is definitely one I'll be playing back. But before we let you go, where can people hit you up? Where can people follow you? Go ahead and just drop any social media plugs you have.
Honestly, right now, I don't have anything great. The RepTillis Instagram page, if you want to follow, is good. But like, I'm just so spent that I just don't have anything to give. I put out
Right.
some stuff on my Instagram page, but not a ton. I put up some stuff on my personal page, but I keep that more trying to keep that friends. So honestly,
Right.
I don't have anything I'm selling or any need to reach people right now.
Leave him alone.
Yeah, but I will, I am knee deep in projects, and there will be a time when that won't be the case. But
That's epic.
yeah, no, I really wish I could be more active because I do so much cool stuff here, and I know I'm not doing anyone a service by keeping it all to myself. So
Yeah.
that'll probably change in the future, but for right now, I'm not a I'm not a good source of content.
And at the end of the day, like, no disrespect, this is for you. Like, you're everything you've invested in, because it's for you. Like, it's something you're seeking. And then again, once you seek what you're seeking, you talk about it. And that's what you did tonight. So, all right, go do your thing, man. Honestly, I appreciate your time so much, Dr. Tillis. Cannot wait for the next one. But guys out there, do me a favor, give it up. It's a wrap for Dr. Tillis, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, man, I'll have you back again soon. We'll talk. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Sweet, take care.
Bye. Dude, what a great episode. That guy is awesome, man. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button for me, please. And again, just to remind you, you can catch a new episode on this network every day of the week. Appreciate all the activities, all the energies inside the chats. You guys are beautiful, man. And again, shout out to all my sponsors. You can find the links to all my sponsors in the description below. And yeah, have a good Thursday night. This was awesome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already, and hit that notification bell. You'll be reminded every episode. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one, man. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you on the next one. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Mark Hager over at Texas Chondros. If you want to talk to somebody who likes to put people on the map, you have to go follow TX Chondros on Instagram. He has put on some of the biggest breeders out in Texas, out on his platform on Instagram. Also displays some of his own amazing projects on his Instagram. You could also simply go to his website, see what pairings he has going on for this season, and also see his previous productions. Mark has been working with yellow neonates on top of red neonates, and his passion for this hobby is second to none. He's also mentored a lot of people like myself. So thank you so much, Mark Hager, for all your support. And if you guys really want to know how it is about building a community, then you got to go check out Texas Chondros. Thank you so much, Texas Chondros, for all your support. Cannot wait to see what you're all about in the 2026 breeding season. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Shout out to Focus Cube Habitats, the #1 PVC enclosure in the reptile industry. Hands down, everything you guys see behind me are 3x2x2 PVC design enclosures by Stephen and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. My entire room at this point, all Focus Cube Habitat enclosures, and that is for a real reason. My reptiles love them. I've had majority of these Focus Cube Habitats behind me for over 6 years now. So guys, if you're looking to expand your reptile room and get yourself some new enclosures, no better place to visit than Focus Cube Habitat. You head over to focuscubehabitats.com and see how many different design enclosures you could choose from. And you can also follow them on Instagram and stay updated with all current new enclosures on their YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Stephen and Ashley over at Focus Cube Habitats. And I think I got new enclosures in the driveway, so I gotta go. Shout out to Focus Cube Habitats. You are the best. Thank you for all the fellow support. Thank you so much for anyone who watches the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Hit that like button. If you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, you'll be notified of every new episode dropping here out of the network 7 days a week. And also by hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, it pushes this network out to other new keepers coming into the hobby. So by you doing that, it does more than you think. So thank you so much again for all the support. And if you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. We're doing big things over here and we really appreciate it.